pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Need a motion to declare an open meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion, move to second to declare an open meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Number 4, the notification of the Opens Meetings Act is posted on the door in the back of the room. Number 5, roll call. Chance?
Yep.
Caden?
Yep.
Wyatt?
Yes.
Myself here, Justin?
Present.
And Melissa's gonna be a few minutes late. She's over at the wrestling supper. So. Number 6, approve the agenda. We got any changes?
Nope.
Need a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as stated.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Number 7, public comment. Anybody want to speak tonight? Okay, seeing none. We will move on to our discussion item. That's the facilities report, and Bob is here again tonight. So we kind of presented this to the Building and Grounds Committee, but I have a full board here tonight. So let him take it from here.
All right, I'm gonna have Darren just pull up one of the plans. So, thank you for being flexible with me. I know you guys met during the day earlier, and we kind of pushed this to the 4th Monday instead of your 2nd Monday. So what I want to do just for the full board is give you an update as far as our process goes, working through the facility audit. What we've done since the last time I was here to report is we have had our engineering team come through your facility as well. They've built their kind of observations of what they're seeing from the mechanical, the plumbing, HVAC systems. The biggest thing, I mean, they go through what you have and they go through some recommendations, which is what will be in the final report that will be part of the booklet that I submit to the school board for your facility study. And the biggest thing, obviously, and you can tell just by looking at this room, you don't have fire sprinklers in your high school. So anytime you start touching an educational facility, state fire marshal, first thing they're gonna say is, do you have fire sprinklers? Because if you have internal classrooms that are not on an exterior wall, it's like an automatic trigger. You have to have fire sprinklers in an educational occupancy. So I won't bore you with all of the HVAC type things that are in there, but that's one of the big ones. So you'll see that in the observations. That's something that we'll report out in the facility audit. And then we talked about in kind of a timeline that I worked through with the building committee and worked through with Darren about, you know, having the facility audit done in April so that if we wanted to present it out in a public setting, we would be able to do that. And right now, I would say we're on track to do that. What we've been working on as well, beyond having the engineers come, and this is the big concept plan, we've been working through some different variations of floor plan options. Generally, what you're seeing here, from a site plan standpoint, we had to kind of rotate north so it would fit because it's a long kind of stretched out site. So obviously north is to the left in this plan. You can see starting from your track and field and then working your way south, where you have the existing gray areas are existing facilities where we're not really changing anything within that footprint. The green areas represent potential for future growth of the district. So you can see potentially adding on an addition on the north side of the elementary. That could be pre-K, daycare, classroom spaces, things like that. Renovation of some of the classroom spaces, those are the blue areas. So blue areas are within your existing roof lines, but potentially, depending on the different options we're looking at, as you vacate a space, it could be backfilled with another feature. With the discussions we had with staff, when you're talking, you know, big picture ideas, one of them is a secure facility. So this being an idea of saying, hey, how do we get to one school district where kids don't have to go back and forth between the street? That's an option. There's a lot of things that have to come into play for that option to work. We have to work with the city. We have to know that we can close the street. The biggest thing I can tell you as part of all of this process is this doesn't commit you to anything. Okay, and that's the one thing I want the public to understand too, is you have these board meetings and we're talking about facility improvements, we're just talking, okay? The goal being, you have a roadmap, and if you want to go to the next step, this is a good starting point. So we want to have a basis of information. We want to have an understanding of what's here in the facilities. That's why we bring the engineering teams in to look at your HVAC, look at your plumbing, look at your electrical services, so that when I tell them, hey, is it possible, if we wanted to look at closing the school, do you see any problems with that? Does it trigger other things within your facility? So it's a basis of information for your school board to be able to fall back to say, you know, this isn't something where we're just coming at it blind. We're going through a process of analyzing the existing facilities, talking to the staff, finding out what they feel are things that could improve their educational, athletic, CTE spaces, all of those things that make your school function. That's part of kind of this facility audit. You can also see new parking. So we're showing on the east side potential for pavement areas. And again, at this point, I'm just maximizing a footprint of area. I'm giving you an idea of how many parking stalls could fit. Do you have to build all of that day one? No. But it just shows you, hey, here is what is potentially possible. That's the goal of the facility audit. Okay?
Bob also shows on here, upper left, that's the bus barn. The bus barn would not be left out of any renovation.
It's in the study as well, as far as we walked the building, got the
Yes.
pictures.
Because we can't leave that behind if we do anything, that also would need
Yeah.
some
Good call.
level of attention.
I mean, it's floating in the field up there. That's not where it lives, but we wanted to just get it on the plan so we could have one piece to talk from and say, these are all kind of the components of what could potentially happen in a long-range master plan, right? If you do a bond promotion and you want to tackle all this at once, great. If you can't do a bond promotion and you want to look at ways to take pieces of this at a time, you would have that information as a basis point. You know, we look at a what if you just deal with the 1920s building and replacing 8 classrooms. So we don't just have a solution. We have multiple solutions for you to consider as a board to put in the facility audit. At the end of the day, it's going to be kind of your choice, as I'm working through with Darren and your building committee, to say what makes sense. We have lots of options, but we want to drill down to what makes sense to you as a school board and say, yeah, whether it's a minimal touch or it's let's look at the master plan for the next 50 years, we've got both options in there, and we've got plans that you can look at and discuss the what ifs. Okay, and then from a timeline standpoint, again, we're gonna have, you know, the ability to give you the book before the end of April. We've talked tentatively about the last Monday.
Maybe
of
a
April.
month from today.
Yeah.
Would be the 4th Monday where, where you've decided maybe we should start meeting the 4th Monday of every month. So potentially a month from today in the Pirate Gym, for Bob to be present, to be a noticed board meeting, and he would present the full audit on the big screens, be quite clear for everybody to see. And again, that's just, here's what you have. It doesn't start to go into possible solutions. That's where we, kind of identify, as we kind of already have, and we'd invite this collection of community folks and stakeholders. Please come to this facility audit presentation, because we're going to want you to help be part of the primary conversation. I think if we can be ready to go a month from today, that should really accelerate, I hope, community engagement.
So at the facility audit, you're not presenting this?
It's up to you.
Or you're
I mean,
just
I
presenting
could put,
what you found and what
I could
you're-
put something generic like this up here, or I could approach it from, hey, here's the fact-finding mission we went on. Here are the things teachers brought up. I don't have to show a plan, but I would talk about, security's a concern. If there's a way to connect the buildings, that's something the staff has brought up. And it would make, for a safer school environment, if you're not having to walk to the ad. Again, I would preface any public presentation of this facility audit to just say it's just that. It's just an informational packet. There's no strings attached. When the audit's done, it's a report that you have. It's up to the school board to take the next step. But it's also an opportunity to say, if you're a community member and you are interested in this process, we'd like to engage the community as a next step. That's what we laid out for you, the building committee group, is kind of a timeline of, if you wanna go through and try to hone in on what is the right type of project for Plainview Public Schools, and if that involves going to a bond, how do you get there? So it's your decision every step of the way to say, let's move to the next step, if you feel you're ready. But the first step is the facility audit, which you've already started, the public presentation, and you're gonna get feedback. You're gonna hear from the community, because I'll be there to answer questions, you know. Let them ask me questions. I'll speak to what I know just from a fact finding, but it doesn't obligate you to any dollar amount, any specific scope, because for the schools that I'm involved with through this process, this is always the first step. We just went through this in Pierce, very similar process where we did the facility audit, we did the public presentation, we had the people stand up and say, yeah, I think it's time, we should do this, what can I do to help? And then they move to the next step. I'll be back in Pierce on Wednesday for a community group process where they're hopefully in the next month or so gonna kind of hone in on, they wanna put forth a bond. That community group is who is going to make a recommendation to their school board to say, we've gone through with the architectural team, with the construction manager at risk team, we've looked at the cost, they've toured other school districts as part of it. A small group of their committee went out and looked at other school facilities that have recently been done, recent bonds that have passed. And then they'll be able to, as a community group member, go to a board meeting and say, hey, if you're gonna propose to the public a vote of the people, we're behind this project, we would tell you, our group supports this and we will help try to get it across the finish line, right? So that's where I see the best success for school improvements. If you're going down the path of a bond, you wanna involve the community and you wanna also allow them to go through the same process that you're going through as a school board to understand. A lot of times what people don't see, they come to your sporting events, they'll see the pirate gym, right? But they come in and they go out. You know, they don't go into the 1920s era building. They don't go down to the wrestling practice rooms and see what the other spaces are like, the old science classrooms. You know, they probably could remember, you could say, well, yeah, remember going to school here 30 years ago? The room is the same room. You know? It's just a fact. But just sharing that information out and letting people understand and walk it for themselves as part of that process is very helpful. So we can go into as much depth as you would like with this as your open public meeting, or we can continue working as we have with Darren and the building committee to kind of hone in on, here's the options that are going to be in the facility presentation.
Yeah, maybe if you go into a little detail on what you're proposing for each, you know, for the guys that weren't here.
Okay.
Why is the egg building not in the outline?
Because the ag building is part of the new construction. It's the green box in this plan on the southeast side. So we would move out of the ag facility and pull it as part of.
And then we're selling the property then?
You wouldn't have to sell it. We've talked about bus barns, we've talked about other storage areas. So there is still a use for that facility.
I just thought the
It
red
just might
outline
not
was-
be a student-related
Oh,
use,
okay.
where students have to go
I was just assuming the red outline was all property.
there. It needs to jog around. You're right. It needs to jog around here. You can see the black outline that dashes around it. And correct, yes, we'll fix that in the.
No, I was just
Final.
confused by it, that was all.
Yeah, I didn't pick up on it, you're right though, it needs to encompass that piece. The other thing that would be helpful down the road, because this is based off of property lines shown on your county GIS, which are not tethered to physical pins, right? It's my best guess based on what I can see online as to where that property line runs. When I first laid it out, it looked like your van storage building is about 5 feet over your property line. I don't know if it is or not. It may be right on the property line. Best case scenario, I'm gonna say it's right on your property line.
It is, the city gave, they did pin.
They did pin it?
Yes.
Yeah,
And
so
they-
you're right there.
They let us go right up to it.
Yeah. And that would be a future discussion too, as we look at this. I'll just walk around and kind of walk you through what some of the things we've been discussing about what elements would live within these boxes. So, for this type of a plan where we're trying to create one unified kind of K-12 facility. You've got your 1920s era building that's in here that is a multi-story building that has the oldest systems in it, you know, restrooms that are non-ADA compliant, HVAC systems that are issues, floors that are settling, that are moving. So this contemplates full removal of that. It's gone. In addition, if we're looking at fixing and pulling some of your ag and shop features back to this building, you have woods here now. As part of just looking at the elements, one of the options is to just say, hey, if we're already gonna commit to tearing out the 1920s, it's probably gonna be cleaner and easier to just run that all the way through where your locker rooms are. Just clean that out, and then you could have all new woods, metal shops. And we're playing with locations. If you look at the options that we have, some of it's just moving labels in rooms. So in one, you might see band over here, and one you might see band over here. And some of that comes down to the discussions we have with, you know, the principals and the staff. We say, well, yeah, band is noisy. It'd be nice to isolate it if it could be here. That's one benefit. But it just depends also on, you use the stage right now as your main performance space. So does there want to be a better adjacency there? And the study doesn't have to answer that question and give you a single solution, but it wants to identify what are the competing interests, right? And at some point, you've got to make a decision which interest is more important than some of the others. If the disruption to the other classes says, hey, band fits way better over here because it just is isolated from a sound standpoint, to have it on this part of the addition than in this part of the addition where we have, you know, maybe classrooms that are replacing what was in the 1920s. So instead of having vertical classrooms, now we've got to kind of spread them out along a new corridor. So a lot of this is replacement of the 1920s and then bringing that shop area back into one facility. You know, renovations of rooms. This is obviously where the superintendent's office is. This is your current stage and gym space here, which could be renovated into more of a dedicated theater space, because part of a plan like this connecting the buildings would look at another gym, secondary gym element, additional locker rooms, fitness areas, you know, everything that we talked through with the staff, the administrators, to say, in an ideal world, if you could fix the things that are pinch points for you throughout the academic day or your competition sports, your practice times, not just being able to hold events at the school, but even just have practice times for the students. You know, having a new consolidated in one facility administrative entrance, and we have plans that look at it on this side, and we have plans that look at it on this side. And again, it's competing interests, right? Do you want an athletic entrance that utilizes the parking, or do you want, with student parking during the day, the admin on this side? Or does it make more sense with Maple Street coming through here that this is the admin entrance? Okay. If you go 2 stories on some of these spaces, you know, a new gym's automatically going to be a 2-story space. With the footprint that we have, do we elevate the wrestling buildings or the wrestling practice spaces as part of this? So we have some plans that puts really through this area, and actually we look at an option here too for a second story space. But when we do that, we try to be selective about including spaces that are those type of spaces that wouldn't force you to put in an elevator. You're not required by code to have an elevator until you're technically 4 stories, but there are instances from an ADA standpoint where out here it would be the state fire marshal reviewing. Takema Herman's a good example where we had fitness on the 1st floor and wrestling on the 2nd, and we have 2 stairs, but we don't have an elevator. And that was a discussion with the state fire marshal to say, look, this is a facility space where typically you're able-bodied when you're a wrestler to begin with, but even in the event that you had somebody who couldn't navigate the stairs that wanted to do wrestling, you can make an accommodation with their gym space to hold practice, you know, on the ground floor. So when you can have spaces like that, if we put classrooms on the 2nd floor, that gets a little trickier, because unless you can say, you have that situation now. If you had a student who was in a wheelchair or couldn't navigate the stairs, and you had the only science classrooms were on the upper floors of your 1920s building, at some point you might have to make an accommodation and bring that classroom down, right? You could do that as long as you had another science, you know, if you could say I got 1 science here and 1 science here, you can get by without being forced to either install an elevator in a multi-space building like that. So there's nuances in the code that we try to consider when laying out things like this. But that's the main thrust of kind of what's through here. Having a common media center is a big item for staff. You know, you have this media center, which we're in now, you have the media center in the elementary, but you share staff, so going back and forth is challenging. If there could be one common area that would allow for that, and then this could be repurposed into classroom spaces, right? So again, you might lose some classrooms if you eliminate the 1920s building, but if we had a common media center space, that would free this room up to be maybe 2 more classrooms, right, that face both your corridors. So that's what we get into when we're showing, you know, the blue spaces like in here. Renovating some of the science labs, renovating this space. And again, it's levels. How far do you want to go? If we don't build a new media center space as part of this, then you keep this as a media center space, and you have to keep this as a media center space. And that's an option. Is it the best option from a staff standpoint? No. But at some point at the end of the day, there's going to be money that's involved with trying to achieve these things, and that's when it either says, you know, we take small parts and we try to go pay as we go, or we go after a bond. So.
Bob, why don't I blow this up and put labels on it?
Okay.
It, you know, so that'll, be a little.
And it's easy for me to speak in generalities because I've gone through, I think we've got 6 different iterations so far. And each one builds, you know, we do an iteration, we share it back to the staff to say, okay, take a look at this, how does this work? You know, well, you know, Art really wants to be closer to the elementary, or I'd like the locker rooms closer to the existing locker rooms. So we're kind of in that back and forth stage, but with the number of times we've done that now, it's, the big shifts are kind of done, I would say, and it's more of maybe moving some labels. So as Darren pulls that up, I'll walk you through one of those. Okay, so in this scheme, just like, and I'll start on this corner and kind of work my way across. And I'm probably close enough, Darren, I wouldn't worry about having to read all of these. I can tell them what they are. Wood shop, welding shop, you know, a common area in between CAD classrooms, storage areas. You know, with the school districts that I work with, I'm giving you enough information to know that I'm utilizing the amount of square footage that I would expect you to have if you're going to build a new shop. But I'm not going to the full-blown detailing of saying, this is, you know, where your metals are stored, this is where your plywood is stored. I know that we need those spaces, and I'm master planning for those square footages. But I also want to be a little loose, because at the end of the day, when projects become real and they're funded, I still want to come back through and go through that, a little bit of that fact-finding process again. And once it's real, you know, I can tell a woods teacher that, well, you could be here, you could be here, I could front this street and have a door facing this way. That's not the time to get too in the weeds with the staff. So the facility study lets me at least hear their comments and ideas, and then start master planning for it. Once it's a real project, as long as we've done our job and have accounted for the square footages and generally worked out a plan where they make sense, the community group effort can always throw surprises in there for other ideas that maybe the staff didn't consider. But generally, this gets us within the ballpark of what you would need to consider when you're saying, when we lose some spaces, how do we gain those back? So from a square footage standpoint, wood shop, CAD classroom associated with both those, welding shop, replacement classrooms from what are your current classrooms in the 1920s. Kept band and vocal music in this plan here because of the relationship to the stage area. In this plan, you've got science classrooms renovated, you've got the potential to renovate this into some replacement classrooms that came out of here. Art, if you get a new art classroom as part of the new addition, which is in the far upper left-hand corner of the link, this could still be utilized for pottery, which today happens out in your hallways whenever they hit the pottery section.
Right on the other side of it.
Yeah, they don't have the space in the art classroom now. So having the flexibility as you're building new space to kind of backfill or even keep art as a function, but now it's a dedicated space that doesn't bleed out into the hallway. That's what we're showing here as a renovation space as well. When we get into kind of, well, the other things I will say is, you know, this is your existing weights facility space. And As we relocate that within this plan, fitness would be a second floor space here. I don't need fitness here anymore. One of the conversations is circulation. How do we get from this side of the school to this side of the school? Well, today, you're going through a classroom or through a gym space. So if there's opportunities to ease some of that student flow with kind of a cleaning up of some of those corridors and making clean circulation paths, that's what we're trying to do here. You know, could this be spaces for guidance for OT/PT offices? It could be. But again, that's something that as long as I know I'm kind of accounting for, hey, I want to renovate this space, it could be storage. You know, there is a lack of storage with some of your athletics, and I took some of the storage out that lives here now, so I'm shifting it back onto this side. But I wanted to take it out here because it helped me kind of square off some lines and clean up some circulation paths. Same thing when we look at linking the buildings. You know, another gym was a desire of a lot of the staff. One of the big discussions we had too is, you know, this is your new gym, but it's 50 years old. Is that right? So from a competition standpoint, would it be nice if we could have a gym facility that would allow you to lay 3 wrestling mats down? You know, well, 3 wrestling mats is different than just a basketball court. You know, gyms like this are typically about 100 by 100, which is what this is. But a wrestling mat's 42 by 42, right? So if you're gonna lay 3 of them out, you need at least 126 feet. So that's why this one extends farther than your existing gym. And these gyms weren't contemplated in the days of trying to do triangulars with wrestling events. It just wasn't the function of the day. So at this stage of the game, if we can try to fit 3 mats, great. But it's a starting point, right? It's not saying you have to do this and you have to have, you know, we have a walking track. That's a great feature for community fitness, and that's always a thing we start with if it's a desire of the community. Eventually, we're gonna talk about the cost of that, and if it survives, great. If it doesn't, it's okay. It's part of the process we're going through to just identify what are all the components, what are the puzzle pieces. I wanna show you what the options are. Again, going through to try to fund this is another step in the process, and it's one where we just have to continually inform people along the ways. Getting a commons area, getting locker rooms associated with the gym. You know, when you have a big event space or even 2 big event spaces like this, you do need spaces when it's halftime, when it's in between, or you got 2 events going. You need some space for people to flow out. So the commons function is something that I would recommend, again, you need to have here, especially if it's associated with a concession space for people coming out in between meets or events. In this plan, this west side, we do identify maybe some parking here, and this would be your main school entrance with your admin, secure vestibules. So instead of just hitting a camera and being buzzed into the building, where now you're through the front door, modern school design, we're always kind of forcing people to come into the building, into a vestibule, and then you have to come in and actually meet somebody. Technically, we're also locking them in the vestibule. Before they even get through the door, once the school day is started and students are in the facility or should be in the facility, you lock all your perimeter doors and you allow community members to approach a door like this. It's up to you whether or not you want cameras outside like you have now, and you can restrict people to the exterior first. But typically in Nebraska, we have bad winters, right? When it's -20 out, nobody wants to stand outside and wait. So first step is you let them into the vestibule. And then even here, we have, with the reception space, we have glass vision so you can see who's in the vestibule, and you don't typically buzz them through this way. You bring them in and talk to them, and then they can cycle back out and go to wherever, or if you want to hold them there and you're bringing a teacher to them. But it gives you that flexibility to control who's in your building and where they're going, which you're still doing with the camera you have now. What you're not controlling is, hey, I come to meet Darren for a meeting and I buzz in, hey Darren, it's Bob, I'm here for our 2 o'clock. And then they let the door open and I have an ulterior motive, and instead of going to Darren's office, I take off to the left and I'm looking for my son, or I'm looking for somebody in the building, right? So a secure vestibule is part of, whether that's on this side or the other side, that's always something that we would master plan in at this stage as well, for security. You know, new restrooms, if you're adding you know, a bigger gym, adding square footage to your facilities, you're gonna also need more restrooms. One, from a function of the number of people in your building, and two, code's gonna require it. So I have to master plan for additional restroom spaces. In this plan, we're looking at the media center kind of being a combined use of what were existing classrooms here and then what is part of a new addition. And some of that just comes into play with having a really big footprint for a gym and only having so much distance between our buildings. But a centralized location for the media center was a big item for a lot of the staff, saying it makes more sense if it's gonna be both high school and elementary. We want it accessible to both sides. So from a square footage standpoint, that's about the footprint we need, and in this option, we split it between renovation and new construction.
Is that locked?
Also trying to get, again, I talked circulation, trying to align up some of these corridors. We made this corridor a little wider, left your existing restrooms that are there, but took out the offices that used to be here. So the principal's office, and your kind of secretary space that's here now at the front door to the elementary comes out for a wider corridor, because a lot of those functions now live down here. Special education, when we move music function over by band, it would allow you to expand special education where you could keep kind of a dedicated special ed piece here. Kindergarten classrooms, we've moved media center over to here. So now when we get to the north end, we have kindergarten, preschool, daycare, and then with potential for pavement, you know, this could be your separate pickup drop-off space for daycare functions.
How many spots was that parking lot?
Was it, I was typed on one of the plans, I wanna say 167.
160-something.
Yeah, I think it was 167. And again, that's one pass.
Right.
We can manipulate that. The other thing, if you'll scroll back down there in the one piece, so what, and it might be a little confusing, it's floating out here, but this is the second floor space where we have these heavier dashed green lines. So looking at wrestling facility spaces right now, you have both boys and girls activities. So having practice rooms that would allow for 2 full mats was a request as part of our kind of fact-finding process. So you can see the size of the mats in here. We fit 2 full mats. We still have, in a situation where we might have a walking track for circulation, you can either come out of those and hit the walking track or head to your stairs that are kind of located, in this plan, are located at opposite. There's some code things we have to work through with walking tracks and how open it is and corridors, smoke gratings, things like that. But again, we're just at the big picture phase here. I don't want to bore you with code things that are, you know, grinding through the back of my mind. I know that we have to address it. I wouldn't show you a plan that I don't think can work. So there's things we can do within these plans to make sure we're meeting code. But as an option, you know, if you've got these second floor spaces, you know, having that ability to tie them into the walking track, you know, if this is fitness on a second floor space, you know, you can either walk the track and see into the gym. That's the other feature of this. This would be at your upper level of the bleachers. So if your bleachers were out and you wanted to walk up the bleachers, you could and step onto the walking track. Or if the bleachers are closed and you don't have that path from within the gym, you have staircases. And I have to have staircases by code anyways to get off of the second floor space, whether it be fitness, the wrestling, any of those areas. And they have to be, you know, 2 ways out. So I'm utilizing the walking track as kind of a connector piece between these 2 elements as well. Okay.
All the admin offices down there, is superintendent still?
Superintendent would still be here.
Okay.
And that would give you some flexibility if you still wanted, you know, in select instances, people, you know, we're not gonna close the doors on this end. The camera system that's there could still be utilized, that's there, but the main goal would be, hey, if you're anybody else than a student and you're coming to visit, unless you specifically know you're going to meet Darren, which is probably a smaller group of people, you know, parents, visitors, anybody else should be coming through the main admin space.
We're also kind of maximizing the street parking still, because we'll have a fair amount of students. The majority will likely want to access the activity entrance, you know, to the east in that big parking lot area. But we have a lot of students that park on the south, So that's a natural entrance for them, and then the parking on Maple, and then down Woodland toward Van Shell, you know, would be a usable parking space as well for that percentage of students. So we're kind of diluting the potential jams of, you know, where everybody wants to be. So I think 3 dedicated entrances, kind of like we have now, actually, you know, does help, just promotes the flow. And we would probably utilize much of the same parking that we still do, only it would be relieved quite a bit with that parking lot.
The way you've got that fitness center, is that intended to be mostly school use, or is it?
It could be community-based as well.
So that, my question, if it's community-based and it's on the second floor, how would they go about that?
That's why I have another floor plan that puts it back here on the first floor. So again, it's a discussion of, do you like the connection in an option like this, where it's fitness and I can walk out and see practices happening? And is that more important of a driver? And that this is a big open commons and admins down here? Or do you like fitness in this location? You lose maybe a little bit of commons area space, it gets a little smaller. It's not the
Yeah.
only solution.
Fitness is logically the same level as a walking track, so your entrance to fitness would obviously be the bottom of a set of stairs for the public.
Yeah.
If we want to make it a community fitness center, which I think would be wise, but again, 1,000 conversations have to happen between now and
Yeah,
then.
and then,
Yeah.
you know, there's options that could be put into play there. You could say, okay, if second level is the driving force and we wanna end there, well then do we put an elevator in? So people who wanna come walk on a treadmill but have trouble walking up a flight of stairs could still access it, right? Or is keeping it on the ground level more important? We don't necessarily have to answer those questions today or as part of the final facility analysis, but what we do want to be able to do is identify the components of the puzzle pieces that eventually will be part of that final solution. So, I mean, you're right. If I were 80 years old and I wanted to use this fitness area, would I be as apt to do it if I knew the only way to get there was up a flight of stairs? Maybe not. But from a school standpoint, I mean, the students who are here would be able to utilize it as well. You could make accommodations if you had to on the lower level, but that's why I have multiple options where we can talk through which elements make the most sense if our buildable area within the property lines is limited and we have a full puzzle, and if we don't start taking pieces out and you try to keep everything on this list, what needs to go up? Or we gotta start, you know, moving playgrounds, right? I mean, what I'm doing at this end tries to not get so close that I have to move existing equipment. Could you move that equipment and put fitness over there? You could. You could. But again, it's part of that interplay of what are the pros and cons and which priorities are going to push us to say it makes the most sense here. It can make sense on the north, it could make sense on the south, it could make sense as the second floor, but which one makes the most sense? And that's part of this facility process. We've kind of kicked the tires, we've put it over here, we've put it on the east side, we put wrestling over this classroom addition. So we're looking at all the options. And that's part of the discussion where I said, you know, this facility audit isn't meant to say, this is what you have to do. It's meant to show you from kind of the bare bones, hey, if you don't do anything else, we think the best thing you could do is eliminate your accessibility problems with the aging 1920s building and build back classrooms as an addition, and you don't do anything between the elementary and high school, that's an option. And so when we go then to say we want to present this to the community, that's where I think we would want a little bit of input from you as well to say, well, we can talk about there's a range here, but is there a solution at this end that makes the most sense?
This was, you know, this is all just a result of all the interviews and all the data gathering that you did with our staff.
Right.
And can you share those ideas and those needs that they?
Yeah, and what we'll have in the
gave you
book
as
is I have all my meeting minutes, they will be in the book, so people could read, hey, these
Can
are all the
you listen
comments.
also to the rest of our group here tonight? I mean, can you have that with you or not?
I don't have it, I could pull up the facility
Just-
audit and
just,
kinda,
you know,
I'll give you the
broad
high,
strokes of
I'll
it.
give you the high level. I
Because
mean,
three of our
generally,
board members haven't heard.
the biggest
you know.
thing that came from everybody that I talked to is, boy, if you could connect these two buildings, that would solve a ton of problems that they deal with, of just students having to go back and forth outside of the building. You have one kitchen, right? So all of your high school students travel to this room to eat lunch. You have one art space, so all your elementary kids travel to this space for art. As well as if they need an indoor recess, this is a lunchroom. You don't have a gym at the elementary. So they're coming over here for recess. And if you can imagine, those of you who have children, when your kids were 5, 6, 7 years old, in the dead of winter to say, okay, it's time, let's go for recess, get your boots on, get your coat on, get all that, and then to go to another building and not have lockers, not have coat-hooks, and you're just, it's, you know, you're not gonna run around in a gym in your winter coat, but you need to put it on to get across in your boots. It just, they lose educational time to that process of moving back and forth. The function of where we have staff that serves both buildings as well, like the media center space, having a high school media center and an elementary media center, kind of staffing that across the buildings is an issue. We get into some more specific things when you talk about special education. You know, they would love to have another room the size of the music room. I'm not saying they'll get it, but that was something that came up specific to special education. Hey, with the students we have, the people we see, and the way we want to break out with the paras, we're tight within the spaces we have.
We're currently servicing some special education needs in a closet, isn't that right?
Yeah, there's some, I mean, when you talk your traveling staff that come here, I mean, right here, right there.
Yes.
What is a closet is being functionally used as an intervention space for kids, for meetings. So yeah, there's a lack of space within the elementary facility, and that's why you're seeing, you know, additional pre-K classrooms, daycare, you know, move into kindergarten, which frees up. I did eat up some classrooms here, but because I've moved kindergarten into the media center space, I've got plans where it labels all the grade classrooms again to show that, hey, we haven't lost elementary rooms. That's a big key. Science labs, we didn't move them, but that was an issue of just saying, hey, we got sinks that don't work. It's just, the building is showing its age. If we could come in, you know, we don't need to move the rooms, but if we could just refresh the utilities, the casework, the systems that are in the space, that's a desire. Obviously, art, we already talked about. If we could have a centralized art that would be utilized for both elementary and high school. You know, I've got a group that would really love to have a dedicated auditorium space that is just, you know, not a practice gym for basketball, but just speech, drama, one acts oriented. So if you have another gym, could this be converted to specific for that function, or enhanced, let's say, to have a better sound system, up-to-date lighting systems, maybe a little better seating in there? You know, you could have a hybrid option where you still at least leave some court space because all your bleachers are back here. That's not this is the final decision, but this is the discussion, right? But again, some of those dominoes have to fall to say you have some other element that shows up before you would completely convert or lose the ability to have a practice there. School safety was always a big issue. The woods and the welding shop, having the welding shop separate. I will tell you, your welding, I forget his name. Yeah, he loves this space, and I wouldn't blame him. He's got a very big, nice facility. And so he was very adamant to just say, hey, I'm happy where I'm at. You don't need to do anything for me. I want to stay right where I'm at. But if you're gonna talk about, is there a desire to have a single facility where kids don't have to leave the building and walk, well, then I'm gonna show you a solution that would move that. And again, it doesn't mean you have to sell the building. Could it be repurposed for buses closer? It could. Could it be some other facility storage? It could. So there's ways to continue to utilize that space. Generally, everybody that's in the 1920s building, it's funny, they say, yeah, the building's old, the restrooms are horrible, but, you know, your speech department loves it, because those are really big classrooms, right? So to say, I'm gonna take the classroom spaces that you have there, and I'm gonna scrunch you back into one of these rooms, not desirable. I mean, they would do it, they understand it's an old building, and there's other benefits to not having those aged bathrooms and facilities over there, but, generally, the staff over there was fine with saying, yeah, I get it, it's an old space, and if you're gonna move me into the building, you know, don't make it any smaller than X, or try to make sure I have room for my costume storage or things like that somewhere near where you locate me. So those are the kind of things, that kind of came through a lot of the staff discussions. But the one that was repeated the most was, by far, just the inefficiencies of students walking both directions between the elementary and the high school. Again, I'll put those meeting minutes, they're in the back.
Yeah, that'd be great, just.
And I'll, you know, in a public
Just
forum.
to show how you got to where you're at now. You're doing a lot of this based on your experiences, but public needs to know anyway, a lot of these are ideas
Yes.
that we speak from our staff.
And in a public forum, when I'm gonna present it, what I will do is take those meeting minutes and I will make that kind of bullet pointed list
Great.
to put up on the board to
Yep.
say, okay, big picture, I talk to a lot of people and they all have their different little pet items that affect their specific vocation, but holistically, here's the big picture items that came out of those, and then just report that out. So yeah, I will do a summary of that.
That's fine.
It's in the document, anybody can look it up after the fact and read it, but I'll give you the bullet point summary of, these are the big picture ideas.
How many documents did the board purchase? How many copies?
Oh, as many as you want.
Okay, so,
Usually I'll print 6 to 8 hard
Yeah.
copies if you want, or if you just say, I just want one hard copy and give me a digital, we'll give you a digital copy
Yeah.
too.
and so if we envision you, making your public presentation in, say, a month from today in the Pirate Gym, do you want him to include this conversation? Cause it'll take about an hour to get to this conversation. That's what Bob would need to know.
The more info that's out there, the better the public can make a decision for themselves on this.
It's a lot
honestly.
easier to understand when you see these labels.
Yeah, it is.
I don't want to have anybody jump to the conclusion though that this is what it is, like
Yeah.
saying, this is just an option. This is just
Yes.
one out of many numerous
Yeah.
potential.
This is taking
ideas.
all the bullet points and saying,
But-
is it possible?
This, you can label it example number one if you want to.
Yeah.
You know, whatever you want to do. I don't, you're presenting it tonight in an open forum. I guess
Yeah.
you might as well go ahead and have it up there at least, so that everybody can snap a pic on their phone and say, look at what we're potentially doing.
Look,
You know?
is that what we had in Pierce, Bob? They wanted more.
Yeah.
When you were done, the community was there, it was the biggest meeting that Pierce had probably in years, and this one hopefully will be as well. Bob left them wanting more. They were curious about potential solutions to, everything that Bob had gone through prior to that. So, you know, to roll out a scope of a solution, I don't think would or should scare anybody off. We're ready to provide potential solutions, you know.
And that was their school board was in the exact same situation you're in now, just saying, how do we want to roll this out? You know, we know we have all this information, but does it make sense to show them the full breadth, or do we wanna say, this is the process we're starting, these are the types of things we're exploring, and it leads to solutions like this, but I could do a community group meeting without the labels, and just show big picture ideas of, hey, you could connect the buildings. Maybe there's a gym in there. It comes down to how far do you wanna go in that first public presentation.
I think it makes a lot more sense with labels on it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Otherwise it's just a
easier.
bunch of colors.
And I think it's important to, like you said, it's kind of a domino effect here, you know, if we're gonna do this, then that allows us to do this with the current space, you know, and if we're not, well, that leaves this, and that might change what we're doing over here. It makes a lot more sense looking at it like this.
And
Maybe
it
flash
shows
them.
how much more thought you put into this, you know, than just 3 blocks,
Right.
yellow there.
And And that's why Pierce wanted more by the
Yeah.
end of it. Because they were asking, I had a full developed plan for the elementary that added another gym at the elementary. And the school board didn't want to go that far in depth. So they wanted to say, hey, we know bare minimum, these are the big needs. We need to fix our doors, we need security, we need, you know, and we built the list, but we didn't show them everything. And then that drove the questions of, well, why didn't you consider this? Well, we did, and we can bring that up and show it to you. There's no right or wrong way to do it. It's what are you comfortable with knowing your community? At what stage do you want to introduce this to the full community or not? Pierce kind of felt in the back of their heads, we want a community group process, so we don't want to bias them with a solution too soon, because we want them to also walk the facility, tour other facilities, you know, generate that process of what makes sense. What are the things that are truly needs, and what through that community group process feels more like a want? Because there's wants and needs in every school district. And there's a balancing act between how far can you go before you hit that tipping point of you're gonna lose more than 50% of the people. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, what you want as a school board, just by starting this process, is to say, we have needs that we need to address. We know we have needs. If we're gonna do it, are there other things we can do because it's cost effective to do it together? But how do we find that balance? And so the facility study isn't necessarily about finding the balance, it's about finding the information that you can use to find the balance. And that's why I caution to say, look, yeah, I can put up this plan that shows everything on the list of, through my fact-finding process, these are all the things that we could do. Doesn't mean you have to do it. This is just an option, an example. And if we're gonna show this, I would also recommend, yeah, let's show the pared down versions too, where it's what happens if we don't close the street, you know. But the biggest need that we've said, you know, we 100% think this building needs to be addressed. And that's where I would even say, even if we get to a plan like this, that from the facility audit standpoint, you as a school board say, boy, I really like all the different parts and components, and we've kind of narrowed it down. If you go through a community group process, they'll pick it apart a little bit too. And they may come back and tell you, you know, I'm on board with everything, but why are you gonna try to push the media center here? That just doesn't make sense to us. You have two good media centers, leave it be. They might tell you that, right? And I could respond accordingly within a floor plan to address that. So I have never had a plan that goes from a facility audit to a bond promotion process to a vote to an actual final built building that looks exactly like, or it would, you know. If I were gonna tell you 5 years from now you're gonna be in this building, I would tell you 5 years from now it's not gonna look exactly like this, because there's still other conversations that need to be had to iron out what's the right fit for some of these pieces. But you're on the right track. I mean, we're getting the information, we're getting the feedback, we're working through options with Darren and his team, the staff, the building committee groups. You know, we're putting in the information so that when you want me to stand up in front of the public and talking through the same process I'm talking you through, I can have those same. But Darren's right. For me to run through, here's the facility study, here's the process, here's a minimal option, here's a more advanced option where we address everything, it'll take 40 minutes, 50 minutes, easy. I can be very long with it. I can. I can also be brief if that's what you think the situation demands. That's where we kind of started tonight was, well, let's start a little brief, and if you guys feel the need to go to this level, we'll go to this level.
I think people are gonna ask, well, where's this room at, where's this, you know, where are you gonna put this, and just have it up here on the screen, it just makes it easier to visualize where it might be, or where it could.
I don't wanna have somebody that whispered next to their neighbor and go, see the 3 yellow blocks, and goes, that's it, you know,
Yeah.
they're gonna wanna see more.
And that's fine.
That's fine, and I don't think anybody has a problem sitting there for an hour and a half, getting to this point.
Yeah.
I really don't. And just like I said, label it solution number one, example number one, whatever you wanna say. This is just, we're just throwing it all out there.
So
This
along
is-
those lines, is it worth, just like you had questions, well, why would you put fitness on second floor? Or why would you put the athletic entrance? Do you wanna show two variations of this type of plan in a public setting like that? To maybe reinforce that we have no final solution, what we have
That's
is
probably smart.
a kit of parts.
Do we have
You know, we're
those
talking
drawings?
about.
Yeah.
I think it's good
Yeah.
to
You just change-
I've got-
Yeah.
Yeah, you just change it.
I've got 4,
So.
here.
Yeah, so this is wrestling, wrestling is over this side, fitness is on that side in this option. I mean, some of the other pieces, this didn't change,
Sure.
right? But it's moving some of the other big
But-
picture
And
elements.
I shared with Bob, the way, we don't want wrestling opposite the gym from the locker rooms, because I don't want my wrestlers, after they weigh in, to walk bare-chested down the walking track in front of the gym to get to, I want my wrestlers to weigh in and go to locker room. So wrestling room, from my perspective, needs to be right above the locker room. So that's why I showed you that one
Yeah.
option.
Which is a great part of this process, because if he's gonna ask me that question, I guarantee you somebody else in the audience might ask me that question. And if I can say, well, yeah, good point, but here's what you gotta consider. If lockers are there and wrestling is here, here's the process that they go through when they weigh in. And from a school functional standpoint, that's not the best solution. It's a solution, but it's not the
Games
best.
going on.
And I'm not seeing.
How are you guys gonna get the wrestling mats from the top floor to the normal floor when you have a meet?
It depends on what you wanna do.
I was just thinking, wanna have it kinda simplified and easy, cause
Yeah.
if I remember right, those things are kinda heavy.
Not anymore.
The new
Dollar
competition mats
mats
are
are
very
not-
light, and they're very mobile, they're like 6 or 7 feet sections. But
You're gonna need like a wide hallway or something, usually wide.
if we had a second floor facility, and if we have multiple home competitions like we do every year, I think we had 6 or 7 this year, you'd almost wanna have permanent practice mats laid down, the big heavy ones that you remember, you'd almost wanna have permanent ones like that, and then competition ones stored somewhere.
We did that
That
at
would be-
Takema, when their wrestling facility is on the second floor and it faces their gym. So they have essentially 2 sets of mats, just like you're saying. Ideally, the ones that are in the practice space stay in the practice space, but we put a set of double doors between the wrestling room and the gym, so that if they ever had a need, instead of trying to go down a stairwell and navigating turns, they could just go right out into the gym, down the bleachers. So.
Oh, that, they were up on the next level too.
Yeah, so imagine if this is their gym, their fitness, or even right here, there's doors that come right out, but it's on the backside of the bleachers. There's a pair of double doors that allow them to go from wrestling with the mats
Yeah,
straight out, so you're not navigating turns.
that's definitely a concern though, cause we got little kids, big kids, all
But you're right,
sizes.
you're committing to saying, we're gonna have practice mats that live in that room and can stay in that room, and we're gonna have competition mats that you can put in here, or when they're done, they live in the storage room.
Or some sort of system to move them, those big ones.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's honestly, from a wrestling standpoint, it's nice to be able to say, hey, we can clean our mats that are in the room, we can lock the door and forget about it and not have to move them back and forth.
Yeah.
It's about a $10,000 investment in a new mat. But again, yeah, you roll them out, use them 4 times a year and store them the rest of the year. From a practicality standpoint, that does make sense, and more schools do that. You don't see the places anymore, mainly because 2 dudes can carry a section, but
Yeah.
if you're moving 3 mats a section, that's a lot of sections. But,
And there's a lot of wear and tear that goes into
Yep.
laying mats down for practice, rolling
Every
them,
time you move
hauling
them.
down the hall.
Yeah.
I mean, we put new dings in those walls and new dings in those mats every single
Yeah,
time.
every time you move them,
They're
they
in
are
jeopardy.
in jeopardy of wear and tear.
So I think I would show some of these variations, that way they know it's not like this is the plan.
Yeah.
This isn't the.
Show some of those pared down versions as you build up to solving those problems, but then you mentioned that domino effect, that was a good example of, well, you want to do, these are things you want,
Yeah.
but now this is what happens.
But I don't think we wanna hold a 1 hour Q&A session,
No.
from the community saying, well, I think you need to move the media
No,
center
it's-
over here, this, that.
I think
This
it's
is,
just
you
a
want to
show,
you want
and
to
then-
kickstart the conversation, so you give them these sketches, these
Yes.
layouts, anyway, the different variations, anyway, then they can go home, anyway, they can talk about it themselves at the kitchen table, you know, whatever, or family dinner, whatever else, but you want to really get things going. I think we gotta show them what you're showing us right now.
Yeah.
Anyway, you got 4 variations of it, show all 4. And show how much work you put into it, you know,
I
and
agree.
then I think they're gonna appreciate it.
After that meeting, I mean, is it something that we make these images public for people to sit at home?
I think if they go on our
I know they go
website.
on their
Yeah.
phone, for
Yeah.
sure, but
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking, on a website.
We can
that
even bring
can
the
sit
hard
home and
copies of the book
discuss.
if people wanna thumb through the
Yep,
book.
I like the idea of 10 copies, one for every board member, and then one for our local media,
Mhm.
and then one to stay, you know, here in-house for folks to come and see. We put all this up on the website, they can access it there. I'd like to push this out to our teachers as soon as the board would authorize me to. I'd like them to see it before the community, or maybe not, but, I mean, they have more invested, they live here. But yeah, I think, you know, Wyatt's exactly right. I mean, if we want to really start to grow some community engagement, this will, you know, this is really, as you say, kickstart the conversation, so, I would, definitely include them as potential solutions in the back of the book, as well as just the simple solution of 8 classrooms and and 2 wrestling rooms.
Mhm.
I'm assuming like your pared down version looks like this, it's just basically taking out.
Kind
right,
of, I
format.
mean, we
We
don't
haven't seen
go
those yet.
as deep into you know, the wood shop kinda stays the wood
Where is
shop.
that?
In that version, we have to get some more classrooms on this side of the building.
Okay.
I mean, even that has variations to say, well, why would you put a classroom over here? Why wouldn't you put it, you know, tear that building down and rebuild it right here? And we could, but the goal is to say, there's a certain amount of area, if you're taking 8 classrooms and you're 800 square foot per classroom, you know, plus some corridor space, there's kind of a volume that you need to build to replace that has a value attached with it. And that value could go here, or that value could go here, right? Working off of existing circulation path. There's things that logically make sense as to why would I put it here versus, you know, I'm not gonna rebuild high school classrooms over here, obviously. But there's still options. It's not a solution. It's, when we're talking about needs, and if we're gonna keep it more minimal in cost, it's tear this building down and replace it. And where do those functions go? Wrestling and classrooms.
So you have the different examples, and I suppose one reason why you wouldn't just do this is there's cost, right? So is cost gonna be split, there's dollars per each example, or how's that gonna be laid out? Or
I don't know if I
answered?
would give dollars per example, but I could definitely give you a range of saying, hey, if you do the bare minimum, you're in for X. If you go and do everything, whether it's any variation, you're gonna be in the ballpark of a high-end number. So I think you could have a low-end number and a high-end number. But again, I think you could get in the weeds to your point of, we don't wanna start, you know, should wrestling be here, or should wrestling be there?
Yeah.
I think you can, it's too early to say, this is the cost.
Mhm.
Because there's so many things yet that aren't fully designed, right?
And when we decide to go ahead and proceed with putting a bond on ballot, anyway, we're not gonna have a final design probably in place, or we're gonna have an idea.
You're
of
gonna
what
have a
we-
scope.
We're gonna have a scope.
Yeah, you're gonna know that it's gonna
That's
have.
still gonna be up in the
It's
air.
gonna have a new gym
Yeah.
and a new administrative entrance and locker rooms, right?
We're just gonna be approving a dollar amount and.
A dollar amount and kind of a scope of
you know,
what are the things. If you're telling the public you're gonna spend X amount of dollars on a bond, we're gonna make sure that you have a new gym, new media centers, new administrative offices, and a daycare, right? You've gotta build that language in the bond referendum, and there's usually a plan that goes along with it, like this. But it's still very schematic in nature with kind of the big block colors of this is renovation. You know, I don't need to go into the detail of saying, I'm gonna deal with, you know, new sinks and new gas valves and things in the science lab, but you just need to say, yeah, we're gonna renovate this block of classrooms.
So the public will be relayed a scope with those engineers?
Yes.
Yep.
And as long as I do my job right, the scope that we tell the public, the dollar amount that you would bond for, builds all of this square footage. Because the worst thing I could do is tell you, if this costs $10 million, and then you pass a bond, and you go out and bid it to the construction teams, and it's 15, right? And now suddenly it's, okay, what do you lose? Haven't had that happen yet. Just to, maybe come just with, and usually with this process, and if you're engaging, I think we've talked a little bit about, you know, you can design, bid, build, you can design, build, you can CM at risk. There's, in the timeline that I set out, it's get through the facility audit and then start looking at a CM at risk, right? Because a messy build like this, where I'm touching existing school facilities, where I still have to educate kids in these classrooms while you're trying to build spaces like this or that, having a construction team on board during this phase of the design is beneficial, because they can see those headaches of, how would I phase this? How would I tackle it? Is it an 18-month project? Is it a 24-month project? And that has impacts on the total budget cost as well. So what I'm hearing is, yes, let's get to this level of detail. Let's not show them a solution. Let's talk about the process, and let's put it out on the table. Which that's the easiest thing for me to do, because I don't have to scale things back to
I want
not
you to
show as
dance
much
around it.
information.
You know, don't dance around it.
And I'm perfectly happy with that. More often than not, that's what we do.
But we want input, don't we, from our constituents? We need input, anyway, find out if we're doing the right thing too.
Creates more
Yep,
questions for them.
it might be a million phone calls, but at least we're gonna know, right?
So, the rest of my process, I mean, we may tweak between the conversations Darren and I are having still, you know, is fitness here, is fitness first floor. But that'll happen in the next 2 weeks. We'll have the final book to you before the 28th. I would target maybe the week before. If we're gonna say the public meeting is a month from now, in 3 weeks, I'd wanna have the book packaged and delivered from a timeline standpoint. And then we do the public presentation, you get the feedback, and then after that, based on the feedback, that's gonna help inform you as to what's the next step. What else? Any other questions?
Hey, guys, Jeff and Steve contacted me and said, hey, can we come to that meeting? I said, it's an open meeting, you know, come on down. Didn't intend to have them, you know, interact at all, but just to be in the room and listen. And likely will be interested in being involved in the process, you know, if we move towards a scope of project such as this, so. But obviously, if you know, Jeff and Steve would be happy to interact if you want to, but I didn't tell them to come planned or prepared to share anything at this point.
Yeah, I just see the meeting as just presentation, just put it out there, and then, like I said, the questions and what Q&A happens afterwards. After they go home, we talk about it and everything else. Yeah, Q&A at the meeting now.
And you treat it just like a regular board meeting, if you're all gonna be there, so you publicize it, it's in the gym. I would need some type of projection.
Yep.
Or TV, so I can show these solutions. A lot of times the school board will set up a table up at the front, have microphones for you guys, so that if there's direct questions you wanna address that come out of this, or at least one microphone, so that the school board can respond as well. I can speak from a mic or I can yell. I can be very loud if I.
You'll speak from a mic, we'll connect it to our Score Vision screen, so you'll have a laptop on a
Yeah,
stand, and so,
people can see from
Yep.
multiple vantage points.
yeah, they'll be looking at the big one, because we'll put folks in the north stands, and we'll have a couple of tables kind of just inside the doors facing back towards the east, to the north and to the east, and the Open Meetings Act posted in the room, and this will be the only item on the agenda.
And so it's kind of an informal
conversation between you and the public with
You can be,
Q&A,
yeah.
and
I'm happy to
that's
answer.
fine, you're okay with it.
Oh, absolutely.
That's how you typically do
Yep. Yeah, and there's gonna be people that'll show up, that'll be, why are you doing this, why are you spending money? There's gonna be people that are saying, why aren't you doing more? I mean, you get all sides of it,
What
and.
we want is input.
Yeah, but from my standpoint, the simple answer is, they're just options. I'm not here to tell you this is what you're going to see in the future, but we wanna hear. And a lot of times, that's what I'm really like, you have a school board here because they wanna know your thoughts. They're not telling you to go do this, they're saying, how do we engage the community? How do we understand what's right for the community? And that would be something the community will support. So, I always kind of lead off, just like I did tonight, hey, these are options, these are discussion points, they're not decisions that are gonna be.
it. Well, there's something about just seeing it, versus just talking about it, and when you see it, that stimulates interest, and people are gonna have questions. That's good.
Okay,
Yeah, thanks for
take a seat.
all the different options you come up with.
This is a fun part of the process. It's engages my creative side, right? Problem solving.
All right, well, if nothing else for Bob. We just got a couple quick action items.
Just number 9.
Number 9, discuss and take possible action to approve a 1.0 FTE certified teacher contract to Avery Dietrichson for the 25-26 school year.
This would be to fill that second grade spot. We had a resignation last meeting. She was one of the candidates that we interviewed for kindergarten. So it was Mrs. Hudson's recommendation that I support.
I'll make a motion to approve a 1.0 FTE certified teaching contract to Avery Dietrichson for the 25-26 school year.
I'll second.
Moving second, and then to approve a 1.0 FTE teaching contract to Avery Dietrichson for the 25-26 school year. Any other discussion? Not, we'll vote. Myself, yes. Justin?
Yes.
Melissa?
Yes.
Chance?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Wyatt?
Yes.
Okay, motion carried 6-0. Do we have anything for number 10?
No.
That's good. All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming in. Thanks to Jeff, Steve, Bob. We'll plan that.
What was the date we were talking, 28?
Monday the 20th.
Junior high track at Pierce.
No concerts or anything.
Conference art show and then Tartan, junior high track, boys golf and Randolph.
Thank you.
So that shouldn't preclude us from having a meeting. Those events shouldn't preclude us from a meeting in the Pirate Gym.
Well, kind of plan on that?
7 o'clock, or what's your start time?
Yeah.
7?
Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think things should
I've
be
driven
wrapping
much
up.
farther and stayed much later.
Okay, excellent. I'll make sure that gets posted, notice in the paper, and we'll discuss it and obviously start to promote it, but we'll have our regular board meeting on the 14th. But just, that's a big one in April.
Okay, well, we're adjourned for now.
Thanks, everybody.